Is that better?
That was good DJing right there. That second part.
The second part.
So don't, if you're still considering a vet for your wedding or bar mitzvah, don't worry, she's got it under control.
I'm developing my skills every day. Welcome to Wicked Opportunities Live. I feel like this time around I was a little less stressed. I have no idea if it's working. I see Timothy says, he's on, which is good. So if you're on, let me know, so we know whether this thing is on. Welcome to the Wicked Opportunities live stream podcast. We do it once a month. We're actually pretty good about this one. The weekly pre-recorded one, we've sort of slacked a little bit, but we're going to get back on it.
Yeah, it's time to get back on the horse.
Time to get back on it. Today we're talking about why foresight efforts fail.
We are talking about why foresight efforts fail, which is not like my favorite title of, a podcast or a show or a book of all times.
Because you think it's like negative?
It's always a negative, it sounds like a negative thing,
yeah.
But it's highly important because there are a lot of people who are like, oh, I really want, organizations to adopt foresight, and I really want this to work. And a lot of times it even seems like sometimes it looks like it's working for a bit, and then suddenly it's not working anymore. And that's what we want to address today is why do foresight efforts in organizations or in governments or in society sometimes get a good start and then peter out. We say peter out if that's not a global term.
Peter out, I don't think
peter out. It's like just sort of just falls off.
Before we jump into the topic at hand, shall we acknowledge a foresight great that has passed away, but she was so influential, and I think we'd be remiss without mentioning it.
Yes, late Sunday, the foresight legend Hazel Henderson. She passed away at the age of 89. Hazel was, and will continue to be, highly influential in the field of foresight, practicing for multiple decades, and set the tone and the methodologies and the skill set and the mindset for a lot of the success that foresight sees today. I loved a post yesterday by another foresight legend in his own time, Sohail Inyatullah.
I feel like we needed a crowd cheer. I have no idea if that will go through. So
and he said, I remember years ago, I believe he said in Hawaii, sitting on a panel with Hazel Henderson, and
he said it was like the 1980s.
I believe he said 80s. It was way back. It was a long time ago.
It's just yesterday. A little aside here. I'm in my retro outfit today. I've got my retro waves going. Yesterday, I don't even know how I ended up on this path, but I ended up looking up, how did we end up on the Future Homemakers of America topic yesterday?
I don't know, but we were watching last night I had the pleasure of, I'll get back to Hazel in just a second because it's so important.
Yeah, it is important.
I had the pleasure of seeing a video filmed at Yvette's high school during her senior year.
Yeah.
In 1991. Oh, sorry.
1991.
I probably shouldn't have said the date.
No, I'm fine.
People. I graduated a little bit before you did, just a little bit.
No, but you were surprised to find out that I was the president of the Future Homemakers of America club at my high school.
But I do believe you can do anything.
No, yeah, I know. You're treading lightly here.
I early on in our partnership, going to a printing store and watching you within 5 minutes of being at the store go behind the desk and at the register and start helping the woman do her job. I then knew that Yvette could do or would do or feels like she should do everything.
I think that last statement was right. So I had forgotten that I was not only involved in the Future Homemakers of America, but that I was the president. And that could be the topic of another podcast.
Could be.
But I did a Google search. I'm going to get back to Hazel in just a second. You'll see the connection. Maybe you won't. I don't know. So I did a Google search. I don't know what I was hoping to find. I know what I was hoping to find. I was hoping to find something that would remind me like what it was I was doing, because I never thought of myself as a homemaker. Not that there's anything wrong with being a homemaker at all.
No.
But even back in high school, that's not what I sort of envisioned for myself.
Right.
And so I was trying to remember, was it like a speech topic? Like what was, because I remember going to the convention and like being part of an event, but I can't remember what it was I did. I'm pretty sure it was not sewing or cooking, or if it was, I definitely didn't do well. Anyway, in that search is when I found the video montage of my high school, my senior year.
And
I wasn't actually in the video.
I was so excited because I was like, and it's a long video too, so we're going to see Yvette here somewhere as a senior in high school. But she went to a high school that had thousands and thousands of people in it. The campus was as big as, Apple's or Google's campus.
It was in Miami.
I went to a high school that like the total population of the whole high school was 400 people, so each class had like 100. Your daughter goes to a high school now that only has like 50 to 100 per class too. But you had like 1,000-something people in your class.
Ours was gigantic. It was
crazy.
in Miami. And so not surprisingly, the video really showcased a lot of sort of the cheerleaders, the football players.
Well,
I was neither. I was not involved.
You were in the geek club.
I was not involved in any athletic pursuits.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
And now they work for you. That's there's a college in America called Vanderbilt University. And it's in the same sports league as the one that you went to school at, which is a great university, University of Florida. But Vanderbilt never wins any of the sports tournaments, football or baseball and all. Florida, Georgia does and all that. But the Vanderbilt students say, that's all right, that's okay. One day you're going to work for me or something like that. Anyway, you'll work for me anyway, yeah.
Anyway, why did this have to do with Hazel? Because I was just thinking about, like, my daughter came around, my 15-year-old, who is... tomorrow is her final day of freshman year of high school. And so she was particularly interested in this video. Again, I think hoping to see me in my teenage self. But watching that video, which again, for me doesn't seem like that long ago, 1990 something. But yeah, she caught a glimpse of the computers in the background, and of course they look very different than the computers. Of course, the video quality was classic VHS like quality. There was just so many artifacts, and the reason I wanted to share this story is because when you shared with me this morning that Sohel had shared that and about Hazel, how Hazel in the 80s, and of course she wasn't alone, but she was definitely a pioneer of the field, was talking about a solar economy. I think, when we think about foresight efforts and why they fail, I think it's, has a lot to do or a feeling for some that, we're not making headway. Here she was talking about the solar economy in the 1980s. And when you see, the things going on in my high school video in the 90s, and it's like a lot of things have changed, but so much has stayed the same. And I think there's some aspect of it. Someone had asked where in Miami,
I was going to say,
Kendall. So I went to Sunset Senior High School, home of the Knights.
Is it still a high school? Still there?
It is still a high school.
Great.
It is still a high school.
Sunset High.
My high school experience was unique in that it was huge. But I went to the United Nations basically in high school. Like I didn't know it then that it was so unique.
Right.
But Miami was such a diverse population even then.
That's nice.
That when I left and went to college, it was like a little bit of a going backwards a little bit. But then especially when I started my first job and I worked in Connecticut, New Milford, Connecticut.
There was an outlier.
There was not a Hispanic person other than myself and the person who was cleaning the office.
There's also another famous story, which we'll have to leave for another time, of you saying to somebody that wanted to hire you in your young gun days, it's like, I don't want this job because on the back of the brochure, it's nothing but a bunch of white men.
I did say that. I didn't say it quite like that. I said, I noticed from the picture of your board members on your annual report that you tend to favor white men.
How was that really different from what I just said?
Older white men. And I said, what is your plan? What is your plan? Or what would you say to someone who is not an old white man?
What is your plan to correct this injustice?
Yeah.
Anyway, Hazel Henderson, 89 years old, pioneer in the field, passed away on Sunday. Thank you, Hazel. And thank you to
Yes.
those pioneers in the field. And thank goodness, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Peter Hayward on Future Pod podcast just recently, in the past few weeks,
Wow.
interviewed Hazel Henderson,
Really?
her last interview.
Has that been released yet? We'll have to find it.
I'm
if
not
it-
sure. I don't think it has yet.
Yeah, they usually
It's
bundle
coming.
those.
It's
So
coming.
when that's available, we'll release it. Yeah, I think again, it's just, strategic foresight, for those of you that are new to the field, isn't new, right? And so I think it can be, I don't want to say demoralizing, but I mean, I think it can be frustrating, when you look at things not changing. I mean, I think we would be remiss if we didn't just also acknowledge for a moment what happened here in the United States in Texas yesterday. We had yet another horrific school shooting. And as you all know, at the Future School and at Kedge, we are hopeful optimists. We are transformationalists. So while we don't dwell in fear and risk and threat, it is we have to acknowledge the fact that in a modern world, we are still doing things barbarically. We are unable to facilitate change in even the most basic elements that I think the most logical person would agree. And I think we're going to talk about some of the elements to why that is. When we talk about foresight efforts failing, we're really often talking about why change efforts fail and why we fail to transform ourselves, our communities, and our society. So we talk about this moral imperative.
Right. That, we often say, even to our clients, thank goodness that, we've finally gained the fortitude, I think, to say. We didn't used to say it all the time, but we do say it now, and I'm so glad for that the team here does. And I know there's many others that, had already, superseded this, that we have a moral imperative. We have an ethical responsibility to the future.
Yeah.
And I love...
And to the present.
Well,
I think that's the other piece
yes.
that we forget. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
not
it's
at all. I mean, it's the way we think about the future directly impacts the actions we take in the present. And if we have a lack of imagination, we have a dearth of imagination, literacy in the world, we think things can never change. I was hearing... maybe it was Amy Webb. I can't remember who it was the other day. It might have been one of our friends at Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, saying we tend to underestimate the amount of change over a long period of time and overestimate the amount of change in a short period of time. But both of those statements suggest that as futurists, as people who care about foresight, if you're just starting your foresight journey or you're well along the way, this is more needed than ever before. And I know that we can get frustrated and we're like, what am I supposed to do? And should I go protest on Capitol Hill? Or, if you're listening from another country, what do we do about this global situation we're in, the war in Ukraine right now? You are in such an important place, such an important mindset, mindscape, field, methodology, skill set. Do futures, because we have a moral imperative and an ethical responsibility to the generations yet to come. And as Yvette said, that impacts the actions we take today.
Yeah. If we can get people thinking with a futurist mindset, we could get them to understand their biases. We can get them to understand how to think transformationally, how to imagine and demand a different world than what we're seeing today in so many aspects. So let's talk about why we have seen foresight efforts fail. If you all want to participate, I see a lot of you contributing in the chat, so thank you for that. If you want to drop in the chat what you believe is the most common reason why our attempts at implementing foresight fail. What do you think is if you had to pick one reason, what would it be? Drop it in the chat.
Yeah, why do foresight efforts fail? Why, when we start on a foresight effort with an organization or a governmental entity, maybe it's even going great for the first couple of months or even a year, and then poof, and they're not doing it anymore, and it seems to collapse. So we're certainly not suggesting that's all the time. As a matter of fact, more than ever before, foresight efforts are succeeding. But I know that for those in the field, we wish that things were moving a little bit faster. It tends to seem to be incremental at these very high levels.
It feels like sometimes we're going like 2 steps forward and then we take a step back.
A couple steps back, Yeah, that's
It's hard. We're working against entrenched systems that have been in place for so long. But what we have going in our favor, though, is that those systems, those mechanistic short-term systems, are working against nature. Nature thinks transformatively.
That's correct.
Nature thinks in long-term perspective.
Yeah.
And so it's about unlearning what we've established mechanically, but it's really about relearning our natural tendencies and our human-centric elements that should guide us. I mean, they're ancestral. If you look at indigenous communities, they have the answer because they never lost the answer. We lost our way in a lot of ways from a modern perspective.
Absolutely. Our last time that we did the live podcast, we talked about transformation, so I don't want to go dig that up because you can watch a whole. It's still there. It's on our YouTube channel for you to watch. But I will mention again what you just said is so powerful because all living systems. Let me say that again. All living systems are transformative. So systems that aren't transformative aren't pointing towards a transformative North Star. Because think transformationally, then act incrementally. But the way we put systems in place is act incrementally and see what happens, so that we can hold on to the old thing, right? Yeah. And so all living systems, if a system is around that is not moving towards a transformational outcome, and you don't visibly see that happening, it's not a living system. Mm-hmm. It's not a living system.
One of the reasons why foresight efforts fail is that they leverage mechanistic approaches. Yeah. I know it's difficult. You're working within a mechanistic system, and to propose something that's not mechanistic already from the get-go gets the antibodies out and attacking. But if we are to reclaim our ability to think transformationally and with a long-term perspective, it means reclaiming organic approaches that aren't linear steps that leave us more brittle. So I would say an overarching statement would be foresight efforts fail because they fall in step with the existing mechanistic approaches and systems.
That's absolutely right. So anytime that we don't, follow nature, there's a biomimetic element here too, right? Yeah. Like nature has the answer. So biomimicry, which is largely seen today, in the popular view at least, being like, how do we create products and services and experiences that mimic nature? But it's more than that. We need to mimic nature in its anticipatory science and systems as well, right? That's right. Because the mushroom kingdom and the tree kingdom and the root kingdom and all of nature really anticipates, much as the dragonfly eye that we often talk about, the holoptic foresight, that whole eye that we covered in our transformational podcast last time, anticipates. It's anticipatory. It understands surprise and emergence as a co-creation of novelty instead of trying to control the future. And so futures has often been about control. It's one of the things that made Hazel Henderson such a powerful voice. She wasn't saying like, hey, let's use foresight, but latch it onto our existing systems that are trying to control the future mechanically. But instead, we've got to shift to a foresight way of thinking, which is a natural element for all of nature. We're a part of nature. We've got to stop separating ourselves from the rest of nature. And that will heal this brokenness that we're seeing right now, where it causes, the tragedies that we're seeing. It's a large piece of why we've separated ourselves from nature, from naturalism, from organic. And when you do that, you're going to cause a collapse and tragedy.
Yeah. Another reason, and I'm seeing it sort of echoed in the chat here, is organizationally. There's a few organizational elements that we've seen repeatedly cause our foresight efforts not to be successful. I think there's a lot of well-meaning attempts at standing up a foresight team or division.
Yes.
And while I appreciate the thought process there, and I would never say no to resources that are dedicated to foresight. However, in quick order, this type of effort is not going to be successful because it has to permeate the rest of the organization.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we started off with this one. And like, we didn't really start off because I already see a ton of great answers here in the chat. And I'm so happy that everybody's putting this in there. If you're reading the chat, you're seeing some really great knowledge come forth. But I love this idea that foresight's got to stop being this bubble. And it's like, oh, well, we're going to use foresight when we go to approach our strategy, but then we'll get back on the strategy bandwagon. This is why we say foresight is better served as a philosophy rather than just an idea of it being skills and methodologies. Does it have skill sets and tools and methodologies? Of course, everything, even natural things about psychology and medicine all have those skill sets, right? But it's still operating on the natural body. And it's the same way with foresight. Foresight needs to be a philosophy in our organization that runs throughout all of our systems. It's a way of thinking for the entire organization because foresight is about natural anticipation for co-creation of emergent qualities. And we instead have twisted it and shaped it and molded it unnaturally to be, it's an extension of our mechanistic systems. That's why foresight efforts are going to fail every time when we try to latch it on or bolt it on.
Yeah. Ultimately, your foresight efforts have to be centered on capacity building. This is hard. I know it's hard because just generally speaking, I don't want to paint with too broad a stroke, but in our experiences, certainly almost more so since the pandemic, sadly, organizations and even individuals aren't prioritizing or seeing the importance of development. And that's horrible. I mean, we not only need to build learning organizations, we need to be a learning society.
That's right.
We need to be a learning human system. And so if you attempt to implement strategic foresight and you don't also look at building capacity in tandem, if your thought is, I will just outsource some scenarios, or I'll have a couple of folks on a particular team drive this effort, and you don't engage in shifting mindsets and building capacity and competency, your foresight effort will fail.
It will fail. So why are you doing foresight at that point? See, here's the thing. Foresight, at its very core essence, when, it's like you start on the journey, you're like, I'm so excited, trend hunting. Oh my gosh, this is cool. Robots, I'm going to talk about the future. And the more you go down the rabbit hole of foresight as it latches onto you, because people that get into foresight, it's like a bug. You can't get rid of it. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm devoured by this now. And that means that, you naturally think this way. When you go down that rabbit hole of foresight, you find out that it's not something that will just support our ongoing systems. Oh, here's a turnkey answer. We were just missing this little part. It's much more, and as Hussein says, the emphasis on the natural part is so important. And I see Jacqueline Weigel has joined us. That's awesome. I hope she's still there. It's great to have her, a great futurist in Brazil.
So I'm just pausing here because I don't know if we are perhaps not currently transmitting. Should I refresh this, do you think?
Oh, it's been doing that for a long time.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Yeah,
so
and everybody's still saying, hey, how are you doing?
All right,
We're
good. Right. So capacity building. And I'm going to tell you, if you are a foresight practitioner, certainly within an organization, this is important. But let me talk to those that have hung a shingle, that are consultants in this field. Because that was hysterical the way you're looking at me.
Well, I just wanted to really quick before you say that. I love that you said, because I lost my way a bit because I saw the circle of death over here too. There was a circle of death on our screen.
There's a circle of death, and so we're going to ignore it, and we're hoping.
But ignore that and get back on track. So I want to get back to that in just 10 seconds, but let me say 9, 8, 7, that the Learning Society thing was so powerful.
Thank you.
So powerful. And so I couldn't agree more. And that was my point about foresight being a learning modality or a learning technology. It's a mindscape technology. And so stop trying to approach this as just a bolt. But anyway, back to hanging a shingle.
What I was going to say is I think our firm is unique in that because we're completely open and are built on the DNA of capacity building. Of course, we started our efforts within organizations and then opened up that future school public-facing element, which has really become a mainstay of what we do.
Yeah.
And so we're unique in that we don't just work with organizations or individuals within organizations. We absolutely do that, both in our public-facing programs and inside organizations. But we love to work with individuals that I think on others looking in would say, those are your competitors. We don't see anyone in the Foresight field as our competitor because, quite honestly, we have an abundance mindset, and there's no amount of Foresight professionals that would be enough to address the current gap in futures thinking.
We all have to think this way.
So the more professionals I can lift up, whether they're inside of organizations or outside of organizations doing consulting, the more we're aligning and for furthering our mission. So for those of you that are like we were when we started doing consulting, and you're trying to convince an organization to pursue futures thinking, strategic foresight, maybe a scenario project, you're probably thinking, that's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
To try to convince
Yes.
an organization to spend this money and these resources for a quote unquote long-term thinking project. Now you want me to add in there that it's going to be capacity building, that it's going to be training, that it's going to have that element in it.
Yeah.
They won't even look at the proposal. And there's lots to be said there, I think. A sort of a preview of 2023 offerings. We will be spending more time and energy focused on you practitioners that have hung a shingle and that are looking for advice in building the business case with your clients on implementing strategic foresight. So more to come on that. There's lots to be said here, but just know that if they balk at the competency building, at the capacity building element of your foresight offer, then they probably weren't going to be a great client for you, and you probably wouldn't have been successful. Now, that's a trite answer because we need to figure out how to get them comfortable.
That's right.
And there's ways to do that. But again, be courageous, be brave, and know that without capacity building, foresight efforts are going to fail.
I love it. And of course, it's just like riding a bicycle. You get on it first and you fall off, and then you take the training wheels and you're good to go in a straight line without falling off. And then eventually you're going to be doing, wheelies and tricks on your bicycle. And it's just like anything else. Like you learn how to talk to potential clients in a way that they go like, oh gosh, you're right. I do need more capacity building. I can't just let it be a two.
You build the bridge. You build the bridge.
Right. And so there's all of the, learning how to talk to people and get them to go down the path. And of course we could talk about like, what about getting a client just to put their foot in the water first? And
for sure.
Of course,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
But I think your overarching umbrella statement is very powerful. And that is that, they're like, I do not want this, then it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard road to hoe.
If they're isolating and siloing these efforts, it's not going to be successful. So if you're inside an organization, again, and if you've been given these resources and this charter, that's amazing. Your implementation plan needs to include socialization across the organization. Yeah. Quite a few of you said lack of support from leadership and organizational culture. How do you get leadership support, and how do you shift the organizational culture? It's through capacity building. It's through making foresight your operating system.
So what you're suggesting is very interesting, because what you're suggesting is that foresight companies, consultancies, consultants, foresight professionals, they really need to shift the focus away from like, hey, look, I've got a thing where I could do 2 workshops with you and we could find a product, which is totally viable. As a matter of fact, I think that's an output of the other thing, right? And they need to start saying, look, what we really do is culture building, capacity building, competency building. That's what foresight is about, because this is a new way. It's from organizational development to organizational transformation. It's a shift from strategic planning to strategic foresight. It's a shift in the way we operate. It's a new operational model.
Yeah, let's take the viewers and listeners back to almost to the beginning, not quite all the way to the beginning of our partnership, but certainly.
This is like one of those dream sequences. It's like,
yes.
And then you suddenly see me without the scruffy beard on today. But we look a
both,
little younger.
We would both look a little bit younger, a little less worn. When we were first discussing the engagement with Walt Disney International, so I had left Disney. I was no longer a cast member, an employee of the Walt Disney Company, I had decided to hook my horse to you. No, my...
Yeah, I know it's what your cart.
My cart?
We decided to partner.
Yeah, let's say it that way. Yeah. That's better. And I had done some stuff internally for Walt Disney International, and they gave us a call because they were like, it's great, and now I don't have to borrow you from another segment. You can just come do work for us.
Did you say that? Every one time during every podcast, it has to do that.
So my point in saying all this is that when they contacted us initially, they were like, "Oh, we're going to do Workforce of the Future."
Yes.
And it was like, I want to teach the boomers to use iPads. We just talked about this. It actually was that. Yeah. At ASP. Yeah. So
we need 15-year-old interns to tell us what the future is going to look like from the consumer point of view.
Right. And so this is a great example of meeting that client where they were. We said we would absolutely address all of these current issues. My baby boomers don't know how to use iPads. I don't have a comprehensive global talent management plan. And I don't have innovative thinking. Can you implement an intern network? And we said, what if we answered all of those problems and in the same time period prepared your organization for the next and the next and the next thing? And that's the trick, right? It's about foresight efforts are successful when they link the future back to today, when they address the current need, but build adaptation, resiliency, and transformation going forward, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was just reading some of these great comments in the chat. But yeah, that was it was so great to sit, because it's one of our famous stories, right?
That's a good story.
To have the leader say, because we sat at the table with them. There was only 4 of us in the room, you and me and 2 others, 2 of the leaders of Walt Disney International. Yeah. And the fat cat in the room, the big guy in the room, said, I want these 3 things. I want boomers to learn how to use iPads and all. And we said, we hesitated and we looked at them.
No. You're not telling the story right. Frank said.
It was a joint effort.
This thing you said. You said, well, if I had free reign. And he said,
I'll be honest with you too. I froze for a moment. I was like, why did I just say that? Did I just lose it? Like, I said, if I had free reign, I wouldn't do that.
He said, go ahead. Tell us what you would do if you had free reign.
Yeah, he goes, okay, you do have free reign. What would you do? And we said, well,
we'll develop a culture of future thinkers.
All of that's going to be accomplished when you develop an enterprise of future thinkers. Mm-hmm. And then all that stuff's going to fall into place. And they were like, you have free reign. Yeah. And that was amazing. That's a good day. That's a good day.
We left that meeting. That was in Burbank on the studio lot, Walt Disney studio lot. And just because I know what we love about doing the work that we do with all of you in tandem is that we just get to be ourselves and we get to tell you these sort of behind the scenes stories of like real life that happened to us. So we left that and we were headed right to the airport. And this was a big deal. This was, a big client, a huge client for us at the time. And we walked off the out of the meeting room at the studio lot in Burbank, California at Disney, and then jumped in the car, and we proceeded to start driving out of the parking garage. And we were in the parking garage for 10 minutes, and the parking garage is not that large. And the whole time we were like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? He said this and you said that and we said this. And it didn't occur to us that we were literally circling the same level of the parking garage repeatedly because I kept turning the wrong way in our rental car. And we laughed because, man, we just got this incredible opportunity, but we're not gonna be able to meet it because we're gonna be stuck in this parking garage for the rest of our lives.
Oh well, that was a nice meeting. We'll live here now. I love that Craig says in the chat, if the sooner we get foresight into the lives of our people, and that happens at the primary school level, the better off we're going to be, because it sets this culture, this social culture, a social field or social language of foresight, and that he actually got the chance to do that this week. So that's really proud. Keep that work up.
I think the good news is that I think our children are innate futurists. We really believe that we all have the innate ability to think in a long-term perspective and to act in that way, and that it's only because we're growing up in a society and in a culture that values traditionally more short-termism, that gets really almost beat out of us, just like imagination and creativity. It's very similar.
That's right. Well, it's one of the reasons that, and we'll get back to why some more foresight efforts fail here, but I love foresight because it is a funnel discipline. And when we talk about creativity, co-creation, to create something is forward-looking, right? So foresight is about creativity. Foresight is about intuition. Foresight is about empathy. Foresight is about care. All of those are forward-thinking words, you know. And so, again, funneling foresight down to another mechanical effort to develop more, you know, a chocolate-flavored, you know, ice cream cones that can. We don't need more products. We need more foresight thinking. We need more foresight-oriented people.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
So another reason that foresight efforts failed, so we've talked about them being too mechanistic and just sort of trying to latch on to current mechanistic systems. So we need more organic approaches. We talked about it being, as a philosophy, running in the background, really impacting culture and developing capacity. I think another reason why foresight efforts fail, and again, we saw something in the chat to this end, is they stay at the surface.
Yeah.
And they don't delve into the why. And a really easy example of this is when our foresight efforts are solely tied to trend identification and trend hunting. It's not to say that trend identification and environmental scanning is not an important part of strategic foresight. In fact, I think someone said foresight efforts fail because they don't do enough environmental scanning.
I saw that.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Robust environmental scanning is critical. But all too often, people equate strategic foresight with trend hunting.
Exactly. And I think that that's tied to the systems that are in place now. The systems that are in place now try to define foresight as, tell me a trend that I should react to be able to commoditize.
Again, it's working within our current systems that are very data and quant centric, and have this, you know, underlying metaphor of what have you done for me lately. And so, what's interesting is we've said this a million times before, that trends are not the future. Trends are the present. That's why we can see them.
That's right.
Right? But we have to analyze the trends. And so, you know, when we only focus on the trends, the data, the tip of the iceberg, we miss the opportunity to create long-lasting change. Again, this is about creating long-lasting change. And so we talk about the future existing across a spectrum, and foresight efforts that stay at the trend level, at the tip of the iceberg, are really just sitting at that push end of the spectrum, which is the trends and the emerging issues and the demographic changes and the horrible things that are happening in our world and the good things and the technological advancements. And those things are important.
Yes.
But we often ignore the pull into the future. And I think this is what we're seeing time and time again across our society, and why people feel like the world will never get better, because they're only focused on the push end. They don't even know. They don't even know that there's a pull end of the future. Which has to do, of course, with our aspirations.
And like you said earlier, our mechanical systems every day beat it out of us. We don't even realize when we're in our car, we're driving down the road, we go into that store. All of these mechanical systems are beating out of us to think in a pull mindset. We're always in push. We're constantly on push. Push, push, push. And being pushed instead of that pull. And that's why we focus on transformation and novelty so much. We wrote an article recently about our, you know, my favorite client, my best client, the ones that I want to attract are transformationalists at heart. They may not be there today, but I can tell that there's somewhere along the line they're going to get there, and so I'm going to bring them on. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be a great client for us. But I'm looking for that seed of that. And so I love this idea, because we have to get away from, as Ashley says in the chat, just thinking about what my next disruption is, and thinking about how do we produce novelty. And complexity is the birthplace of novelty. And if we're going to, reach for that novelty, we have to lean into that. I saw a futurist this past week say something that I would like to give a yes and to.
Okay.
So, famous futurist on LinkedIn made a statement. Somebody put the quote up, and it said, "Foresight's not about prediction, it's about preparation." And I would say yes, and foresight's not about prediction, nor necessarily preparation, but about perception. A third P, because we need to be able to perceive what wants to emerge, what's trying to emerge.
Yeah.
And then our organizations become healthy living systems and learning organizations.
Yeah.
Right?
And let me add to this thing that's often unspoken, and it should not be. I think it's becoming more and more something that we do speak about in the field. And that is this push and pull of the future, this idea of pulling our preferred future to today. Or pulling ourselves to our preferred future, however you want to look at it, considering the trends and emerging issues, right? The push of the future, working across the spectrum. It really, the core of that is a recognition that we're all creating the future every day with the actions we take, right? And so strategic foresight allows us to do that in a more transparent, more collaborative, and more purposeful way. However, it only works when people have agency to create the future. And in our current world and our current environment, one of the reasons why foresight efforts fail is because they're exclusionary. There is a huge swath of the global population that does not have the privilege of thinking about the future, let alone creating an aspirational future. And until that changes, until we include the marginalized voices, the unheard voices in our narratives, in our work around strategic foresight and futures thinking, we will never, ever have successful, widespread foresight implementation.
Yeah. Well, we could dive down into a bit of what I think sounds a little bit like conspiracy theory at this point, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I don't want to go there, but it's like, how much do we maybe just even subconsciously not want people to have that agency to think about the future? Maybe it's just a subconscious thing because that's the way the systems run. It's really best for people not to have that kind of agency because then they won't just be our consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And that might just be totally subconscious. I'm not saying somebody's in a back room formulating a plan.
But however, our organizations, our political systems have been built to thwart change and progression. And the average organization, the average multinational, traditional corporation is built with the blocks and the methods and the systems and the structures. Those silos, they're not bugs.
Yeah.
They're features.
They're features.
These are features, friends.
Yeah.
Friends,
That's right.
These are features, right? These are intended because the organization wants to stay in the status quo. The traditional organization wants to stay in the status quo, but we know that that's impossible. So there's this constant tension, right? But that's why we have to rethink a lot of these structures from the ground up. But again, anytime you can include marginalized voices, and both within the organization and beyond, your foresight efforts are going to have much more likelihood of success.
Yeah, and this goes all the way back to us saying at the beginning that a dearth of imagination literacy. And that's, Rial Miller would say in one of his interviews some years ago, the greatest modern invention is the dissemination of knowledge. This next great invention will be the dissemination of imagination. Just like we disseminated knowledge, but we're not there yet, and we're trying to creep towards that. So you want to start a revolution? Foresight. You want to start a revolution? Futures thinking. The heart of foresight and futures thinking is revelatory.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And that's, I think, why organizations avoid it, because they're like, oh my gosh, you're going to help me think of a new product. And then they start to get the whiff of the revelatory nature of foresight. But it's also a reason why a lot of transformative leaders are latching onto it. And today people are seeing that, there's this balance between revolution and also we just can't stay in these systems. We're going to die. And so, but I'm so proud of the organizations that we get to work with on a regular basis that do come to us for, hey, we want to use foresight and we make this product and we do this thing and all. And then those 4 or 5 people that we work with are change agents. And so again, maybe another reason that foresight efforts fail is because we think that we're working for this large organization when in reality, we're really making contact with those 4 or 5 people in the organization. And we need to dig into that whose lives are being changed.
I was going to say, I think we uncovered a new reason why foresight efforts fail. They fail because they're too successful. And they get squashed because
it's status quo.
When you were saying that, go ahead.
The Disney video that they made in Argentina, it ends with this great quote by Walt: "We must continually keep our eyes focused on the future." And then Walt died, and they're like, get rid of that quote. We dug it back up. We were like, this is going to be front and center. He said in 1955, we should be looking at the future, not the present and the past. It'll keep us in the status quo. And there's this great part on there where the guy says, in a Spanish accent, because it's made in Argentina, it's a beautiful video. And he says, living organizations, back to our living thing, they continue on because they see the need for transformation and change. The lifespan of most successful organizations is 30 to 50 years, and then they peter out because they finally reach the death, and they're like, we're going to hold on and we're going to dig in. And a living organization knows how to transform and change.
Yeah.
So it's so important.
Something that you said when you were talking about not wanting to be the conspiracy theorist struck me. Obviously in history, there has been documented, and not so long ago history, sadly, documented instances where there has been a concerted effort to keep education, specifically, for example, the ability to read, away from swaths of the population, so that those in power can remain in power.
Of course. I mean, I wanted the audience to just be able to say, like, but Frank, they do actually do that. And no. Without this video going forth as a conspiracy video.
No. But
you're right. No, you're absolutely right. I was going to take
it a step further.
You're absolutely right.
And say, futures literacy, or the ability to think and unpack and unlock our inner futurist, said better, is, that's what needs to be quelled now, is this desire to think about the next generation.
That we could have a different future.
And that we can have a different future.
Yep.
Because it is, you often talk about hope theory, and it's when we lose hope. And that's what I'm so worried about right now. I think social media is amazing, and the access to information is amazing, but that without the ability to think critically, without the ability to think aspirationally, without the privilege of being able to realize that we have agency to create a better future, the information without those capacities or competencies is actually extremely dangerous.
I mean, this is gold. I love that you just said that, because it's like when you feed everybody this information, but they don't get all that information with hope. Snyder's hope theory, basically in a nutshell, is equals hope. What is the first part of the equation? Is agency, goal, and direction. And when all the information says directionless, leaders won't change anything, nothing changes and all, then you don't get any hope.
Or the world's on fire, the world's on fire, the world's on fire.
And welcome to the bonfire. Get your marshmallows out, instead of and here's the things that can be done, but a lack of imagination.
Yeah, so I've seen repeatedly across social media over the last several years that our human brains aren't meant to process this information. We're not meant to know about the suffering of people worldwide. And well, I'm not sure the accuracy of that. I will say that that's a bit of an easy answer, because I believe that our increased complexity and the ability to connect and collaborate and understand and know people across the globe is a wonderful, amazing gift and advancement.
That's right.
And that we have the ability to update our operating systems, our mental models, to process that information effectively, to be able to respond to that new insight in a positive way, right?
Yeah, Ellen says social media doesn't promote critical thinking. And I think what you're saying, and coupled with what she's saying, social media can actually supercharge critical thinking. It's not the way we're using it. And you often say, we were too young for the internet.
Yeah,
it's
well,
like
we
giving
didn't equip anybody
fire
for it.
to a 5-year-old,
Matches. Here's some matches.
Here's some matches. Go
Be
see
really
what you can do
careful.
with that 3-year-old.
Be really careful.
Right. And I love, one of my favorite sci-fi authors says, we need to replace digital demons with digital angels, and we need a plan to do that. And we need to stop just saying willy-nilly, Zuckerberg gets to run the internet, Musk gets to run the internet now that he's decided that he's full on MAGA, No, you don't get to do that. And that's why, again, we need all of these amazing futurists who are in the chat with us today, because they're going to say, no, you can't do that.
Again, I think this topic in the chat about social media not promoting critical thinking is really interesting. Ashley added to that, it promotes the opposite, quick judgments and fierce outrage. And we all know about the tunnel vision it gives us, and it puts us in a bubble. That's because we've implemented social media on top of the existing systems.
That's right.
Right? We've put it on top of capitalism. We've put it on top of data analysis. We've put it on top of, this idea that the attention economy.
Toxic individualism.
Yeah. That we put it on top of this idea that that we need eyeballs, and that the metrics are what drive, and that we have to drive consumption. It's because of that social media has become the toxic place it has.
Yeah.
And because we haven't equipped our citizens, our community members, with the ability to, have the digital literacy to grapple with fake news and all of these things.
And,
there's so many reasons.
That's a feature, not a bug, because on one of my personal favorite walks yesterday, day before yesterday, where it's a joke there because it's like I'm with myself, so it's always my personal favorite walk. Right?
I was going to say, what walk was that? It was also 1,000 degrees.
And I talked to myself, in the burning hot Florida sun.
So hot.
I'm thinking, gosh, the guys, the digital demons, were the smarter group, because they were like, yeah, if we control the airwaves, it's an age-old thing. He who controls the message controls the minds. And so, that's what has to happen, is we have to have that digital literacy. So again, knowledge dissemination, digital dissemination is an important part of that, and then imagination dissemination is so important. And imagination dissemination is foresight. It is futures thinking. It's so important. So again, that's why foresight efforts actually fail within an organization, because people could jump on this podcast and think, gosh, we went really deep down the rabbit hole, and I thought you were going to say how we could really convince, company X to make sure that their foresight efforts continue on, and they hire me over and over again. Actually, that's exactly what we're saying. And we have found over 20 years that the companies that come back and hire us again are the ones who have the 3 or 4 or 5 people in the company. I'm thinking of my good friend Joanna Linkova, who's the head of foresight at Lego right now, who I guarantee would be saying everything that we're saying on this podcast right now.
Yep.
She would agree 1,000%. Maybe she's listening right now, or I'll get her to listen later, but she would say all of this too. And she's heading foresight at Lego.
Yeah.
And so those are the ones who do have this success. It's so powerful.
Yeah. So I guess, one of the reasons why we started the podcast and started this live stream is to inspire all of you, because I think another reason my foresight efforts fail, and I think this is where we'll leave you all today to ponder, is that we as foresight professionals that are leading the charge need to also be inspired, need to also know that we're not alone. When we gather people for our public offerings of the Future School, whether it's foundations or activations coming up, or transformations, which is our retreat coming up in the fall, one of the first things that people who enter that space realize is that they're not alone. And so I think foresight efforts fail sometimes because we believe we're alone in this fight or in this effort, and you're never alone. And that's one thing we want to make sure that all of you know, that we're right there with you every step of the way, because it is our mission and our goal to equip as many of you to then equip as many of them as you can.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it could sound trite, but it's not. So come join the movement with us and find out that that's true. And I love that you mentioned transformations in the fall, because we're seeing some voices and people joining transformations in the fall that we didn't quite expect, because it's our first retreat.
Yes.
And we're going to dive really deep for 2.5 days there, basically 3 days.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing. I think, again, foresight takes courage.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to explore how we can move past our traditional mechanistic approaches of foresight and break the mold, then we hope that you'll join us in September, because we're going to be launching communities of practice around this new effort to, again, really break this tendency of foresight efforts failing for the reasons that we've talked about today.
Yep.
Not just put patches on these issues, but really think critically about our own profession, about the field itself.
That's right.
And how we practice it, to have courage, to think transformationally, to unplug and focus on the spirituality of strategic foresight and how it impacts the individual and ourselves.
Yeah.
And so if that sounds intriguing to you, let us know. That retreat's
It's gonna be awesome.
that retreat's invitation only, because it's just a very small group that we're gathering, but we'd love to have you there if you're interested. If you loved the live stream, please subscribe. That's the best way that you can know what's coming next. For those of you that have participated in the chat and have listened in, thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout of encouragement too, because I love that you ended with the transformations, but it's like, I think you said this earlier too, there could be this thought going away from a podcast like this. I wonder how many organizations there are. It must be a handful, of organizations that really think this way. If you're saying, as a foresight professional, I have to find these organizations to be a really good foresight professional, there's not many. I don't think that's true.
No, there's tons.
I actually think there's tons. We're working with the largest passenger railroad organization in the United States right now, so you know who that is. I just didn't say their name because, And their CEO is super transformational. And he's like, how do we make this generative? And the end result, the end thing that I care about is this could be the greenest way of transporting people. And we just worked with the CEO of the Metro in Chile, who was like, we don't even think of ourselves as a metro. We think of ourselves as a community development, broad-based prosperity organization. I can't have anybody be poor anymore. There's tons of them. They're ready. They're ready.
And as soon as you start speaking in this way, as soon as you have the courage to talk about foresight as a transformational perspective.
Tell them. They're like, oh my God, please come help me. I didn't think anybody, I know that I have to toe the bottom line. I know that I have to have the quarterly results, but I wanted somebody like you to come help me.
Speak it into existence.
Speak it into existence.
Speak it into existence. All right, everyone. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been amazing. We started with a wrecking ball. Maybe we'll turn back time. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe we should turn back time and listen